Welcome, everyone, to our continuing celebration here on Hangfire as we celebrate Emotional Rescue turning 45 this year. I'm super happy to be joined with Scott Galupo from Stone's Riff Cousins. Scott, welcome back.
Thank you, Justin, for having me, as always.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here to talk about this big anniversary. We're going to come at this kind of different this time around. We're going to have a few different topics that we're going to get through. Hopefully, they'll break down the album pretty well. I'll show them on the screen. So we have a lot to get to. Let's start with the easy stuff. What the album's strengths? What would you say the album's best song is?
I'm going to go with "Let Me Go."
Nice.
I think that's such a fabulous track. I mean, the tempo of it is so perfect. And maybe I'm saying that because the way they did it live in 81 and 82 is too fast.
I can't stand those versions.
I don't understand why that was. Well, I do understand because I guess they wanted to keep the tempo and the energy of the show up.
But Charlie does this choo-choo train beat, which is
2 hands on the snare.
Yeah.
And I don't, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand that choice.
Yeah.
And Charlie almost never makes the wrong choice, so I don't get it. But the tempo and the groove of it, and what sounds like sleigh bells, just throughout the entire, whatever percussion instrument they were using, glues the whole thing together. It sounds almost like sleigh bells.
Interesting. I got to check that out.
And I guess I'm gonna give away my favorite Keith moment. I know that's on the list. I hope you don't mind, but his guitar solo. His guitar solo is really, really great in an understated way. Like, because Keith is not a great, he doesn't have the fastest fingers. He doesn't blow through changes like a jazz saxophone player will, with beautiful connecting phrases to connect one chord to the other. But what he does well, and he learned from the blues, not from Chuck, actually. I think he learned this more from like Freddie King and B.B. King, was to bracket each phrase so there's space between every idea. So it doesn't sound like he's just noodling. And everything he does on Let Me Go, on that solo, is just a nice line every time. And it flows beautifully, and it's phrased kind of, I'm guessing it was one take, just that's it. And he nailed it.
I want to add to that because, we do have a section here on best Keith moment, and this song contains my favorite Keith moment too, and it comes in the rhythm playing, specifically towards the end, when he introduces more of the Chuck Berry rhythm playing towards the end, and especially when you're in E, it opens up the strings a bit more, and he has all these fills too going in. It's almost like the Last Time riff. It's this B-D thing that he does on the second and third string, and going into the A, and he does all these little pickups and little fill-ins going into the A when the A comes in. That's just so lovely. But all that's just
very tasty.
Yes,
his playing on it is very tasty, and the tone is great. And he's not necessarily playing blues in E, because the solo has a lot of major E, like major pentatonic in it. So it's, it's not just stock sports bar blues cliches that he can be guilty of. Like, let's not kid ourselves. But there's some twang to that track, even though it's not country. There's some twangy licks to it, and Mick's delivery of some of those lines is so. Your conversation with Bill Janovitz was fantastic, and there's something he pointed out, maybe in the context of Summer Romance, that Mick's lyrics are casually great.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is a fantastic way of describing, because Mick had his like literary, poetic moments here and there, but not by design. He never wanted to be that kind of a guy. But that doesn't mean there's so many different ways to write a great lyric. It doesn't have to be Bob Dylan kind of, or John Lennon wordplay. It can be something else. And for Mick to say, something like, maybe I'll become a playboy and hang around in gay bars.
And
Like to make those things,
move to the
and
west
then
side
when
of
it's
town.
high harmony on top of that,
Yeah.
move. It's like
Yeah.
that whole thing is genius.
Yeah.
If you like, you read the line on paper,
Right.
there's nothing much to it. But to make those two lines sort of rhyme is like he's the only guy on the planet who could do that.
It's like that weird rhyme in Dancing with Mr. D. What is it? He rhymes a state or a city with another word that just you wouldn't.
New York City and West Virginia, right?
Yeah.
Hiding in right,
Yeah.
looking down a 44 in West Virginia.
Yeah. He somehow blends Virginia and city in New York City to make it rhyme. And you're touching on something which I loved about this album is that this is such a big album for this reason, because he's doing all these, what I like to shorthand, these Dylan deliveries where he's elongating things and, deliveries that are just so unique, that are not throwaways. They're very thought about.
Yeah, and he makes it seem so casual and like he's hammy. He's being a ham, like a character.
Yeah.
The different characters he just sort of, inhabit, like the emotional rescue, all the different voices and characters he assumes on that track alone.
Yeah, there's like 2 or 3 in there. On Let Me Go, let me ask you, because this is your go-to song, and it's interesting because I got this vibe listening to the album, and Let Me Go might represent this idea. Would you consider this album sort of like a laid-back album in a way? Because there's something a bit that's a bit restrained, and Let Me Go is by no means a large song. It's this mid-tempo, laid-back vibe, which is kind of refreshing.
Yeah, in no hurry. Maybe they were down in the islands versus Paris or New York City. Yeah, Down in a Hole is even down tempo.
Oh yeah,
as it should be. And that song that would be my runner up, I think, for
is
one
that
of my,
right?
I mean that character and the lyrics that are, I think he's talking about Germany or Berlin, like the American zone.
Yeah, that threw me off, and I couldn't look anything up about that American zone. There's too many references
I think
about
that's
that.
to do with occupied Berlin right after the war.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, light. But this again is the genius of Mick Jagger, who reads history and can just take a phrase out of it and then throw it in there. But this down and out character bumming for cigarettes and nylons in the American zone, like that is like European down and out. American nightclubs. Somebody in Germany going to American nightclubs and is the dark kind of druggy character. That's Mick. Mick is observing that, and we don't know any people like that, in our lives, our everyday lives. And Keith brought the life of the gutter for Mick to observe.
Right.
Keith lived in it. Mick might have had a foot in it, here and there,
right?
But he stayed out of it enough to observe it. And there's no closer and sharper observer of the gutter than Mick Jagger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he won't romanticize it like Keith might. Mick always has a distance in things, so he can see things very, very far away while seeing the truth of things.
And then I always keeping a sense of irony about it too. Whereas Keith, like in Before They Make Me Run, talking about I got to find my heaven because I've done my time in hell.
Right.
It's like Mick is watching there. Yeah, he's like, yes, you did, Keith. You did your time in hell, and you made it kind of hellish for me at times too.
Down in the Hole is one of 2 moments where Mick really brings us out of the party and into some rather grounded realities. We might get into this more later, but Indian Girl being another moment, which is one of the most maligned songs in the Stones fan world. Which is now our next topic is most skippable song, and unfortunately I have to put this as my skippable song. Between Down in the Hole and Indian Girl, I can kind of get through Indian Girl musically, actually, but it's
Yeah.
still a mistake and a miscalculation totally, from my point of view.
You mean the way he's singing about that subject
Yeah.
matter almost flippantly?
Yeah, I guess so. And just the, the mariachi horns don't make sense in this Central
Right.
American theme. That's a clash of
Yeah, it
things,
is.
you know.
And just the very first time you hear those horns, they sound like real horns,
Uh-huh.
but later they sound like a synthesizer.
Do
Have
they?
you ever noticed that?
No, they actually. I'll have to look at that. You may be onto
It,
something. Yeah.
I don't I don't know if they actually are horns. They sound like real horns in the beginning, and then later it sounds like a synth. But I am fond of that song. I get it does when he's talking about soldiers raping young girls and people starving, and it does sound kind of flip. But I think he was actually trying to be poignant about it in a way that he was just misfired. I don't think his intent was to make light of it. I think he really was trying to talk about life being hard, and life just gets harder and harder.
Which I love the core. I love that bridge. That bridge is quite lovely, actually. Getting harder and harder. That
Harder,
whole part.
yeah, yeah. And you can't shoot down a plane with an M16. By the way, can't. I don't think so.
He'll talk about this, the civil war in Central America in this song. How does that differ from the Mick from Undercover of the Night or High Wire, or Blinded by Rainbows?
Yeah, and those songs he does sound just genuinely uh indignant, or like a real social critic. He's angry. Not that he's singing angrily, but it's just a more straightforward delivery, I think. Whereas, the Indian Girl, but I mean, he was married to Bianca for how many years? I'm sure he spent some time in Nicaragua. And again, he's somebody who reads history, very familiar with the 1970s Latin American third world Marxist turmoil and Sandinistas and all that. And my thing with that, I'm repeating myself. I think Mick always will err on the side of I'm not asking you to take me too seriously.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I will always forgive him for erring on that side. Because to me, it comes from a place of humility, of trying to be unpretentious.
Yeah, sure.
Even because he is a smart guy and he is singing about serious things on occasion, and he just never wants to wear it too heavily. And on Indian Girl, he may have worn it too lightly. But I mean, like the Mr. Gringo, my father, he ain't no Che Guevara. He's fighting with Mr. Castro in the streets of Angola. That is hammy.
You're right.
It's hammy. But you and I, we have a very high tolerance, I think, for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But how many other people can do that and then do that emotional rescue falsetto and singing about being on an Arab horse in the desert? And I mean, obviously I'm a fanboy, but I just stand in awe of people who can pull that off. Like, there aren't many. For me, the most skippable song is "Send It to Me." That one I think is I will take Indian Girl for all the good. I like Ronnie Wood on the pedal steel on that song. I think is really nice. But "Send It to Me" has this great, Ronnie Keith guitar harmony in the beginning.
Yeah, it's a strange intro.
And it's like, it seems like it was composed very...
It kind of goes up.
Like they had to sit down and premeditate that.
Yeah.
Because that does not sound like something they could have improvised.
Yeah.
I don't think. But then that one doesn't go anywhere for me. They're just a girl just sending away for a girl, and it doesn't matter if and he goes through all the Australian, Hungarian, or it could be the alien. Just send it to me.
That's one of my favorite jokes in the album, is that alien line.
Yeah, it is a funny one. I do like. I think that he mentions something about somebody in Australia, like he has a relative in Australia,
Yeah, sister, I think.
Sister Marie.
Yeah.
His mother was Australian, so he really did have Australian relatives. So
Wow.
there's a note of authenticity even in that kind of a silly.
Wow, we caught you, Mick, being real.
Yeah, yeah,
I read that Chris Kimsey said that that song was actually like this 20-minute jam with Mick going on with lines and lines and lines and lines of random things, and they actually had to cut it down for this song. And it makes sense to me because, like, if you think about it, the first line of the song really doesn't make any sense. It's sort of this non sequitur. What he says, I think I've had enough. Religion's tough. It's just a state of mind. I don't need it. You know, I mean, that's sort of like,
which he sang about a little bit of that on Jaw is Not Dead in
ah,
the that outtake
mm-hmm.
sort of.
Did he?
But that would be getting like Mick being like a Richard Dawkins, that I don't think he wanted to be that guy.
No.
Another great point that Bill Janovitz made in your convo with him is because they recorded a lot of these 20-minute plus songs that later get edited, what you get is these unusual guitar fills or Charlie cymbal crashes because they're not saying that this part is the bridge or here we go, we're going into the chorus. It's because they don't know yet what it's gonna be, and there's a lot of magic that's quintessentially Stonesy because of that method, which I don't think anybody would recommend because not many people can afford. Well, not back then. Now, I guess you have Pro Tools and a home studio, you can play for as long as you want. But when you had to rent studio time, you had to be a lot more efficient, I think, than they were.
I love that you bring that up because I think I have a suspicion that one of those moments where they get the big jam and they really make the song in the editing room is a moment in Let Me Go when there's this strange fill by Charlie, which I don't know would have been his choice in the moment. And, it comes in that little bridge towards the bell has rung, I've called time, the chair is on the table, crash, on the door,
yes.
baby,
And that is a great pull there because that is a jam happening and being recorded and Mick coming in later over top of it and making a part out of it.
Right.
Not in the moment. It's later when I don't have my hands on it and I'm just singing over the recording and making it up.
Yeah.
Same with Start Me Up. What Charlie's playing there's almost never repeats itself.
Yeah. Right.
Because they're just playing and it's later turned into chorus, verse later. And that nobody else does. You wouldn't recommend that because it's an insane way of working.
Well, not even the Stones do that. They don't do that anymore.
No.
They come in with songs. They don't jam anymore and make the song up later in the editing room with shears.
Keith would like to do that.
Sure.
But Mick has no patience for that anymore. None.
Yeah. And, I've heard Mick talk about this. What you're getting at is what I've heard him talk about in a different angle, which is he talks about it in the songwriting sense, which is, I don't know how he put it, but when you're coming up with lyrics or the top line or the melody, you want to get as far away from the guitar as possible. You want to get just 2 or 3 levels up where it's not as, because, as songwriters, you don't know that your lyrics are so laying on top of your rhythm on the guitar, what you're playing.
Hands.
Your hands.
Yeah.
And so he wants to remove himself so much where it doesn't sound like it's that sandwiched in. And he does succeed a lot of the times. But I mean, all these techniques are, they're appreciated.
It's a great thing because Keith, we've heard on sessions, just from Voodoo Lounge sessions where he's just, the melody he's trying to deliver to Mick is just what he's doing with his hands. He doesn't even realize he's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very common. And it's strange to me because when he was a young man, Keith came up with a lot of those really crisp melodies in the 60s. if you look at a piece of music that's separated by bar lines, Mick will sing over the bar line, and connect it in a way that's you wouldn't have come up with on your own if you were sitting down jamming it out. And maybe they do say, like, you record yourself on a tape or the computer nowadays and get your hands off of it and then try to sing over your own part. But if you came up with it to begin with, it's like a game of chess or checkers, I think, where you can look at the board and you're stuck. And then somebody else can come in with a fresh set of eyes and be like, that's the move. You just can't see it. And I think with Mick, he's hearing hit the parts and he's like, this is the part. This is your move. And I think Keith really misses that. Like, don't come in with Mick guitar parts, man. Don't do that. Just like he did this great interview with is a foreign journalist. I can't remember which country. But Keith said, I know what Mick is better at, better than he does. And she said, what is he, or what do you mean by that? Or what is he best at? And Keith said, working with me.
Nice.
I know exactly what he means by that.
Oh, man.
Keith is like, I need you. I know I need you. You just don't realize that you need me.
Oh, man. That sums it up. It seems like it's an open secret that this is how the Stones used to record a lot of their songs, which is they would jam it out and they would really cut it up later to build a song. I mean, even the song All About You is basically that as well. I mean, there's an interview between, I don't know where it is, but I saw it on timeisonourside.com, between Bill, Charlie, and Mick. And Charlie was like, I can't believe Keith made a song out of that. And Mick's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, it's the train song. And it goes, oh, All About You. So, like, from Charlie's perspective, he knew it as the train song. So, my point is, I don't think people are aware of this as they should be, that there's a lot of songs that came this way, which is probably why we probably not getting as robust of deluxe editions as we Stones nerds would want. I don't think so. I don't think the Stones want people to know that, oh, here's the 20-minute version where Let Me Go came from, or She's So Cold,
They're so wrong about that. I mean, this is the case that we really do want to see the sausage getting made.
Exactly.
But I think you're right that they don't think that people would find that interesting. It's for them, it's just work or labor. Whereas for us, it's like being a fly on the wall.
Absolutely.
And that's what we want.
Let's get out of the way for perhaps this idea, the premise that's kind of been hanging around Emotional Rescue, which is it's an album kind of leftovers, and it's an album that sort of is like a Some Girls Part 2. How does that sit with you?
Well, I think that came from Mick, so it's not unfounded. If he feels that way, there might be something to that, but I don't think that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing in itself, because all of their albums feature some kind of leftovers from something before. It was pretty rare that they ever started purely from scratch. And even when they say that they do, that they did, there's still ideas that hang around that they've brought, or just never finished. So just generally speaking, Emotional Rescue does get, because it's in between two really highly regarded albums of Some Girls and Tattoo You, that it's this kind of little stepchild in between them.
Right.
And it's not as good as those two albums, I don't think, but I don't think it's a bad album either. Not by any stretch.
I did the math on it because I was hearing that a lot, and I went through our trusted sources, of course, the complete works of Rolling Stones by Nico, Centgraph online, and also Times on Our Side, and I did the math, and there's only 2 songs that have been recorded officially that actually did come from the Some Girls sessions. We only have Summer Romance, which came from the January 78 sessions, and then Where the Boys Go, which came from August 78. So everything else was recorded in 79.
And then Tattoo You is almost all leftovers. So, but not from one album. So maybe that's the distinction in Mick's mind, is it's and it's not even true. Like he's misremembering it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so um, and those tracks really do sound like they came out of Some Girls.
Well, and to your point, I hear Where the Boys Go, and I hear that very much sounding like production-wise it comes from the Some Girls sessions. It's got a little bit of that
Yeah,
cluttered, claustrophobic vibe to it that a lot of the other tracks that were recorded for the proper emotional rescue sessions don't have. There's a lot of space, which we'll get into in a second. A lot of
yeah,
these recordings
yeah.
sound
It's a good point.
beautiful.
Yeah, and I think I like the sound of Emotional Rescue more than Some Girls. If that
Oh, yeah.
like the sound of Charlie's drums,
Oh,
uh, and some of the guitar, there's a little more texture, a little wider palette of guitar sounds on Emotional Rescue.
what's the most underrated track on the album for you?
Underrated. Well,
Yeah, how do we define that, I guess? But, one that's not talked about much that should get more light.
if not, Let Me Go Down in the Hole. I think Summer Romance is a terrific
I
song.
love Summer. It never was on my radar until maybe this last 6 months, and definitely during my last deep dive getting ready for all this content. And I'm just in love with this song.
I think that's a great showcase for what Ronnie can bring to the like respectable and Some Girls. Those two tracks, and I would put Summer Romance in there. The Mick, I think those are all written by Mick. The chord progressions are really basic, and Ronnie adds this these melody lines that propel the songs and make them distinct from one another. Because if Mick were to sit down and play you the demos of Respectable or When the Wind Comes Down, you'd be like, "Are you sure you got different songs here, Mick? Or what's happening?" But
Right.
but with the little melodic lines that Ronnie plays on all those songs
Yeah.
makes them distinguishable from one another.
There are these lines that for any other guitar player don't need to be there.
Yeah,
If any one of us were to come to these songs like, you're putting too much work into this, Justin, just play A to D, you got it.
yeah.
But Ronnie has the detail.
Very musical guy, and especially if Mick is playing and Keith.
Right.
So I'm not contending for space with just one other guy, but two other guys. That takes a real art, and you
Mm-hmm.
better be finding some meaning and melody
Mm-hmm.
to justify your place on this. And he does.
Mm-hmm.
Just on the Some Girls, the title track, there's a little
Yeah.
and same on Summer Romance. It's kind of a similar line now that it's in my head. These are, I mean, he's playing with the chords and he's riffing off of mixed melody, but to me, those lines give the songs lift and propulsion. In addition to Bill and Charlie, of course. I mean, that Bill and Charlie could take a pedestrian chord progression of A, D, and E
Yeah.
and make it sound great.
Oh, yeah.
If you played that with the guys in the sports bar, they'd be like, "Oh, this song, this is terrible."
Absolutely.
But those two guys and their unorthodox genius make it sound like the Stones.
Absolutely. And Summer Romance has Ronnie on bass. There's a lot of Ronnie on bass on this album. He's on
Is Ronnie on bass there?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's on Summer Romance, Where the Boys Go, and of course, Emotional Rescue. So he had a lot of chances to show off. And it's interesting because how would you describe Ronnie as a bass player?
He's a great bass player, but busy
Mm-hmm.
in relative to how Bill played.
Yeah.
So, I like his lines, but it's definitely I don't want to knock him and say that it's how a guitar player played bass. Somebody who didn't learn on bass primarily versus somebody who picks up a guitar and is like, I don't know what to do here, but I just know what the notes are, and the bass lines can become kind of guitaristic. I don't want to say Ronnie does that because he's better than that, but he's just a little bit busier than Bill would be. Bill's genius was to find these counter melodies, leave some space, and play in the weird phrasing area that you're like, just nobody else would do that. Nobody would play like that. Where Ronnie's a little more conventional.
Dance Part 1 is one of his major contributions on this one, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess he got a co-write on that one. And one of my favorite parts of the album is the breakdown of that song.
Oh, sure.
And there's a little descending Ronnie lick.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a great part.
Yeah.
And I think there's the Jamaican singer Max Romeo, who's featured on that song, just died. I want to say about a month ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yep. And I think Keith might have appeared on or produced a song of Max Romeo's. Yeah, look him up.
This album is very different from like a Black and Blue. Black and Blue is like Groove City. It's just groove after groove. Does this album have a groove? Is there a groove song on here?
I think it's new wavy kind of groove.
Mm-hmm.
It feels very much of that period to me. And that's not bad. I think they adapted to that sound and period very well, very easily, actually. It might have even suited them better, maybe because of Ronnie.
Yeah.
Than the dip of the mid 70s where they were trying to, it was more glam and reggae and funk. I think that this stuff has aged better.
Mm-hmm.
Some Girls, An Emotional Rescue, and Tattoo You, in my opinion. I would take that over the mid 70s albums.
Sure. Yeah.
Even Mick Taylor, as much of a Taylorite as I would take these three over Goat's Head, It's Only Rock and Roll, and Black and Blue.
Yeah, it's so funny because this is its own little 3-album run, isn't it? That's very special. Yeah. It's like the Chris Kimsey era, like Jimmy Miller era was.
Yes. And even the Tattoo You, some of the songs come from the period preceding this one. They're made to sound like then.
Right.
And Chris Kim, the engineering and the mixing, more so Emotional Rescue and Tattoo You. Some Girls sounds like Some Girls and it's great, but it doesn't sound like the other two.
Yeah.
The other two to me are a little more, there's more clarity, more pop to the drums. They just sound more open and full. Some Girls to me sounds a little more cluttered, like you said. We're just like in a tighter room.
Yeah. I wanted to mention this before too. One other cool Keith moment that's in the album that, God, it's so wonderful. It's in She's So Cold, which is another beautiful sounding song.
Yes.
But isn't that wonderful, like surf guitar kind of ticka Keith thing that he does, which he does a lot on that song? It's so wonderful. I don't know where he pulled that out of and how he's been holding on to that, but it sort of ended up on Little TNA too, especially during the breakdown.
Yes.
Bum, 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 bum. That very ticket, you can hear the strings kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's such a wonderful detail that I wish he did more of.
It was some kind of an effect that had to have been.
Mm-hmm.
Some kind of slap, a little bit of echo.
Yeah.
It does sound great. But my favorite part of She's So Cold is right after Mick is singing When You're Old.
Yeah.
When You're Old, You Were a Sweet, Sweet Beauty. Bill Wyman does these two swooping things on bass. Boom, 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 boom. But it's like he's sliding all over the place. And it's so Bill. And like, as soon as we're finished, put on headphones. Because you really appreciate it on headphones. Right after When You're Old, Mick singing that part, Bill just pulls off these, and then he just puts them in his pocket, and you never hear that again.
He has some great moments in Indian Girl too, where he goes, these slides.
I call them gulps.
Yeah,
they're like gulps, like somebody gulping down something down the throat. Yeah. They're so unusual,
very unusual,
and nobody would ever train or teach somebody to play that way.
Yeah, no.
Same with Charlie. The way that the China cymbal, he plays it in these unusual places. And She's So Cold, for instance, I've heard so many people likening that sound to a trash can. It sounds like he's banging on a trash can. And it sounds great. Uh, but to me, that is the magic and the beauty of this band. Is nobody would train anybody to play like this. Like, don't try this at home.
Yeah.
Just don't, because
Yeah.
you're not going to sound good.
It's the classic. Here are the rules. Now go break them. You know,
But you got to know what the rules are in order to break
Yeah.
them well.
Yeah.
You know, like we teach somebody in literature, you know, if you want to be like a real pyrotechnical novelist, inventive, innovative novelist, you need to know how to write it straight first before you go turn yourself into Thomas Pynchon or whatever, you know. You got to put in the work. And I don't know if they ever did, the Stones, but they certainly tried. The way that they started out as songwriters, they were much more conventional.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
trying to write Tin Pan Alley kind of, you know, Tell Me they tried to be normal. They just, you know, it wasn't going to work for them long term.
Thank goodness they felt okay waving their weird freak flag, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, with that being said, how would you rate Emotional Rescue out of 5 stars?
To me, it's a solid 3.5. I mean, if Exile on Main Street's a 5, I can't say that this is a 4, but I'm going to give it a 3.5. Some Girls was a 4. Tattoo You is a 4.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think Emotional Rescue is just a click underneath it.
Yeah.
I mean, I really think it's solid. Some Girls was another 4. So this one doesn't quite measure up because the songs aren't quite as strong.
Yeah. A couple dents.
Yeah, but they're all performed, as you noted. Even if the song is okay, the performance is always worthy.
Absolutely.
You know, there's always, just listening to it as a sound will always make me happy.
Absolutely. This album's chock full of them. This was a lot of fun, Scott. Can we tell people where to find your wonderful work?
Just search for my name, Scott Galupo, or Keith Richards' Riff Cousins. There's some other, I do some Waddy Wach Tell and some other odds and ends, but mostly Keith Richards and Stones related.
Yes, I suggest everyone to go check it out. Thank you, Scott. This was great fun.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.